Charles Kuralt was one of those rare people who could take the simplest story and make it feel like something magical. He spent his career reminding America of its human side, showing ordinary people with extraordinary spirit. To millions of viewers, he was America's most trusted storyteller, a gentle soul on television who wandered the backroads and brought the country closer together. But while the world saw a warm, kind-hearted man, Kuralt carried a secret that would only come to light after his death. For nearly 3 decades, he quietly supported another woman, sending her $600,000, buying land in Montana, and even helping raise her children as if they were his own. To the public, he was the devoted newsman and road traveler. To those close to him, he was living 2 very different lives, and the truth only surfaced through a letter he left behind. That letter revealed the hidden double life of Charles Kuralt, a man who could charm millions on screen but struggled with the complexity of his personal world. Kuralt's story, however, begins long before television and fame. He was born on September 10, 1934, in Wilmington, North Carolina, though he was not really raised there. His mother Anna had only gone there to give birth because the town had a proper hospital. After his birth at James Walker Memorial Hospital, Anna and her husband Wallace took baby Charles back to her parents' 100-acre tobacco farm in Onslow County. That farm was where Charles spent his earliest years. Life there was simple and far from modern. There was no electricity, no indoor plumbing, and no sinks. Drinking water came from a pump on the porch, scooped out with a gourd that hung on a nail. Heat came from wood stoves in winter. But Charles did not complain. He made his own fun by building kites from newspaper and paste made of flour, tying them with tobacco string, and flying them so high above the barn that he joked even God could read the headlines. He carved slingshots from dogwood branches, played with Venus flytraps, and learned to make the most of whatever was around him. The family moved often, first to Washington, North Carolina, then to Steedman, then Atlanta, and finally settled in Charlotte in the mid-1940s when his father became head of social services for Mecklenburg County. Each new town gave young Charles something different, but one passion never changed: his love of radio. At just 14, he was already announcing minor league baseball games and hosting a music show on Waze Radio in Charlotte. That same year, he won a local writing contest for a story about a dog interrupting a baseball game. From 1945 to 1948, he attended Alexander Graham Junior High, where teacher and baton inspired him to pursue journalism. He even wrote a column called The Kaleidoscope for the school paper. That year brought him something life-changing. At 14, he won the National Voice of Democracy contest, one of only 4 winners nationwide. His prize was a $500 scholarship, which was a huge sum for a teenager in the 1940s. He was flown to Washington, D.C., met President Harry S. Truman in the White House, and delivered his speech at Colonial Williamsburg on the very spot where Patrick Henry once cried, "If this be treason, make the most of it." Kuralt later said he wanted his speech to capture that same bold American spirit. The contest was still new, it had only existed since 1946, so his win made him one of the first in the country to achieve it. This moment showed just how gifted he already was, even before high school had ended. Summers were spent back on his grandparents' tobacco farm. Charles worked in the fields during harvest season, handing leaves to stringers who tied them to wooden sticks for drying in barns. But his favorite part was riding 50 miles to the tobacco market in Kinston with his grandmother Rena. She would hitch up a mule to a wagon loaded with cured tobacco and tell him stories about farmers once needing riflemen to guard them against bandits. Charles pretended he was the guard, watching for outlaws, and these rides planted seeds that grew into the storytelling style he later used on television. Growing up in the segregated South left a strong mark on him too. Charles attended all-white schools but could see how badly black citizens were treated. Police violence was common in Charlotte, with local black newspapers reporting beatings in the streets. His father's job as a social worker exposed him to even more inequality. Later in life, Charles never used his television platform to preach politics, but he always sought out stories about people who were overlooked, giving them dignity and attention when others ignored them. At Central High School, where he studied from 1948 to 1951, Charles was recognized as the most talented writer in the school. He edited the school paper, won major contests, and was voted most likely to succeed. But success was already part of his life. By then, he had been on the radio, met a president, and earned money through his talents. He entered the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1951 and majored in history while continuing to work for local radio stations. He covered sports, produced documentaries, and impressed everyone with his ability to balance so many responsibilities at once. He even joined a literary fraternity, showing his intellectual side beyond journalism. In 1953, he returned to Charlotte to work part-time at Ways Radio, where his broadcasts felt more like conversations than announcements. He avoided the loud delivery of most sports announcers and instead spoke in a calm, personal style. Listeners called in with praise, stunned to learn the voice they loved belonged to a teenager. By 1954, he became editor of the Daily Tar Heel, the university student newspaper, and proved he had courage to confront difficult topics. He wrote strong editorials against segregation, despite backlash from politicians who labeled him a communist. When the school banned alcohol in fraternities, he mocked the policy with wit in print, showing his boldness even as a student. He graduated in 1955 with a degree in history, but instead of following his family's advice to go to law school, he chose journalism, a risky move considering his modest background. His gamble paid off. In 1957, when he was just 23, CBS News hired him as their youngest correspondent ever. 2 years later, he moved to New York headquarters and quickly impressed his colleagues. Within a week of filling in for a writer on Edward R. Murrow's broadcast, he was placed on the television news team. By 1960, Kuralt became the host of the primetime series Eyewitness to History. That same year, he helped cover the groundbreaking debates between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, which were watched by 77 million Americans. Variety magazine praised him as young, handsome, and trustworthy, noting his poise and calm delivery. He was still learning television but had already become a trusted face. In 1961, CBS sent him to Rio de Janeiro as chief Latin American correspondent. He was in his 20s, covering 23 countries during times of revolution, riots, and instability. His reports during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 showed his ability to remain calm under pressure. By the time he returned to the US in 1964, he had proven himself capable of handling danger and chaos. He went on to cover the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement. He witnessed soldiers dying in front of his camera in Vietnam and walked with marchers in Selma. His style was quiet, yet deeply powerful, drawing out emotions from people who normally went unheard. But by 1967, Kuralt was weary of chasing headlines and competing with other reporters. He wanted something different. He proposed an unusual idea to CBS. Instead of being assigned to breaking news, he wanted to simply travel America's highways with no plan, just to see what stories he might discover. Inspired by John Steinbeck's book Travels with Charlie, he suggested wandering small towns and telling the stories of ordinary people. At first, CBS thought it was a joke, but one executive allowed him to try it, as long as he kept costs low. That experiment became history. In the fall of 1967, Kuralt and cameraman Isidore Bleckman set out in a rented motorhome. The vehicle was shabby, with dirty seats and a fridge stocked with only soda and beer. They lived on peanut butter and crackers, deciding each morning which small town to drive to next. On October 27, 1967, the first On the Road segment aired. It featured George and June Butler, a Vermont couple who made maple syrup not for money but for joy. George said, "You can get color and you can get sound, but you can't get smell. The aroma is one thing. Maybe it's the osmosis of the sap getting in your system." That simple, heartfelt moment set the tone for the series. Audiences loved it. Kuralt and his small team spent years traveling in motorhomes, eventually covering over 1 million miles and producing 500 segments across 48 states. He interviewed everyone from a 99-year-old bricklayer to a 104-year-old jogger, from a woman with the world's largest ball of string to men who lived as hobos riding freight trains. In each story, he found dignity and wonder. He often said he disliked highways because they allowed people to drive across the country without truly seeing anything. Instead, he stuck to backroads, where life felt more real. By the 1970s, On the Road had become a beloved part of American life. At a time when the news was filled with war, riots, and political scandal, Kuralt's segments were called 2-minute ceasefires because they gave viewers a moment of peace. He won multiple awards, including Emmys and Peabodys, for capturing the spirit of America's ordinary people. His story about hobos in California earned him an Emmy because he treated them with dignity at a time when most of society ignored them. Another story about a one-room school in Montana showed the devotion of teacher Ira Perkins, who had been teaching for more than 50 years. Kuralt told it with respect, making viewers care deeply about a man they had never met. His journey across America turned him into more than a reporter. He became a companion to millions, someone who reminded people of kindness, resilience, and the beauty in everyday life. But while his career brought joy and trust, his private life held a secret he carried to the grave. For nearly 30 years, while married, he financially supported another woman, even helping her children, and kept land hidden in Montana for her. His double life only came out after his death in 1997, when a letter he left behind revealed the truth. Charles Kuralt's story is both inspiring and complicated. He showed America its best self, capturing small stories that reflected something larger about humanity. Yet behind the warmth he offered the world, he struggled with choices that divided his personal life. In the end, he left behind a legacy of storytelling that still resonates. His voice was steady, his words gentle, and his eye for human dignity unmatched. He reminded people that the heart of America was not in the headlines but in the lives of those who lived quietly along the backroads. His life was proof that a man could be both celebrated and flawed, and his stories remain a treasure because they revealed not only who America was, but who it could be. He had promised to visit all 50 states, and it wasn't just a headline or a story for the cameras. He meant it. Charles Kuralt lived among the people he filmed. He rode with them, ate with them, and shared their struggles and their triumphs. Every mile of the journey was documented with care, and his stories revealed something deeper about America. The judges at the Peabody Awards saw it, too. They gave him another honor, saying he had proven that the pioneer spirit was still alive. What they admired most was how he found deep meaning in small towns, how he brought forgotten places and overlooked people into the spotlight, and gave them a voice. In 1976, Kuralt told a story that captured the nation's heart. It was about a blind man who attempted to climb Mount McKinley, the tallest mountain in North America, now known as Denali. The man could not see the world before him, but he climbed anyway. Through Kuralt's storytelling, the country witnessed what true courage looked like. People were captivated, unable to look away. Kuralt reminded them that heroes didn't only exist on movie screens or in politics. Real heroes were ordinary neighbors living quietly among us. That episode became a model for the stories that followed about grit, hope, and the quiet strength of ordinary people. By 1977, On the Road turned 10 years old. To celebrate, Kuralt filmed something as simple as barbershops in small towns. But what looked ordinary was anything but. In those shops, men gathered to talk about everything: sports, politics, heartbreak, and dreams. A haircut was only part of it. The barber's chair was a gathering place, a little world of its own. That same year, Kuralt revealed something surprising. When he first pitched On the Road to CBS, he only asked for 3 months. No big plan, no assigned stories, no guarantee of success, just 3 months to see what might happen. But instead of ending, it stretched into 25 years. The journey wasn't easy. Motor homes broke down in the middle of nowhere. Kuralt slept in freezing, cramped spaces. Roads were unmarked and endless. Yet he never stopped. In 1979, his focus shifted to something new: endangered animals. On January 28 of that year, during the very first episode of CBS Sunday Morning, Kuralt stood against the cold winds of Cobscook Bay in Maine and spoke about bald eagles. He said, "Someday, if you are in the right place, and if you are lucky, you will look up and see an eagle on the wing. It's a sight to stop your heart." At the time, there were only a few eagles left. His words weren't just poetic. They were a warning, a call for people to care more about the earth. He explained that Alaska, with its 30,000 bald eagles, still held hope, and that America needed to protect that hope. That same year, CBS gave Kuralt a new challenge. He would host Sunday Morning from a studio in New York. But he refused to give up the road entirely. During the week, he traveled to film stories. On weekends, he returned to New York to host the show. He lived like that for nearly a decade, until 1988, when constant travel finally wore him down. After 21 years, the road had taken its toll. By then, his reputation was more complex than many realized. Some assumed he was only a gentle storyteller, but he had faced danger before. In 1989, he reported on the democracy protests in China. Years earlier, in 1967, he had joined an expedition to the North Pole with Ralph Plaisted, enduring temperatures as low as 40 below zero. In the 1960s, he covered the violent Congo Revolution. He could handle hard news. But over time, he grew tired of competing with other reporters to break the biggest stories. That exhaustion was part of why he chose the road, because he wanted to tell stories that mattered in a different way. In 1990, he released his memoir, A Life on the Road. It became a bestseller. But it wasn't just a collection of happy memories. He wrote honestly about the hardships. He described nearly freezing to death while filming the Northern Lights in Alaska, where temperatures dropped to 60 below and even the cameras froze. He admitted how lonely the road often felt, how weeks could pass without a real conversation. He remembered collapsing from food poisoning in Louisiana and spending 5 days in the hospital. He recalled almost stepping on a rattlesnake in Arizona. Sometimes, he confessed, he pulled over just to scream at the sky. The road was not always kind, but it was the life he chose. Despite those struggles, Sunday Morning thrived. Under Kuralt's leadership, it won 3 Peabody Awards in 1979, 1982, and later again. One of the most famous segments was a simple 90-second video of nature. No words. No narration. Just the changing seasons. Each one took 3 to 5 days to film. Sometimes the crew waited hours for the perfect light, the perfect moment when a bird would fly or a leaf would fall. Kuralt demanded it be done right. He often re-recorded voiceovers a dozen times until every word felt true. He personally chose every story, rejecting dozens each week. People began waking early on Sundays just to watch. By the early 1990s, over 6 million Americans were tuning in. On April 3, 1994, Charles Kuralt retired at just 59 years old. Many thought he deserved the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1996, but it never came. Still, he received other honors, induction into the Television Hall of Fame and the Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Journalism. Even then, he didn't slow down. He launched An American Moment, a series of short stories airing 3 times a week, and hosted I Remember, reflecting on key events in history. But behind the polished image, his private life held a secret that would one day shock the world. On June 1, 1962, Kuralt married a lawyer named Suzanne Petey Baird in a quick ceremony at New York City Hall. To anyone watching, it was simple, a fast wedding between a rising journalist and a brilliant attorney. Neither she nor the public could have guessed that this marriage would cover up a 35-year lie. 6 years later, in 1968, while traveling for On the Road, Kuralt met Patricia Shannon, a divorced mother of 3 in Reno, Nevada. That summer, after the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy, America was tense and grieving. Amid the chaos, Kuralt arrived at Patricia's door with 36 roses. They talked all night in a motel lounge. That night began a secret relationship that lasted 29 years. By 1969, Kuralt helped Patricia secure a divorce. He moved her briefly to New York, then to Colorado, far away from his wife. That same year, he began sending her large sums of money, nearly $600,000 over the next decade, worth more than $4 million today. He funded her landscaping business, paid for her studies in London, and bought her homes in San Francisco. At the same time, his wife Petey was managing finances and hosting dinners in Manhattan, unaware her husband was living a double life. In 1970, Kuralt bought 20 acres in Montana by the Big Hole River. He built a cabin there, telling his wife it was a fishing spot. But each September, he disappeared not alone, but with Patricia. Over time, he expanded the property to 90 acres. He even transformed an old schoolhouse into a $180,000 writing office where he planned to retire with her. With Patricia's children, he became pop. He gave them gifts, taught them to drive, paid their tuition, and spent holidays with them. At work, CBS viewers saw a humble, kind journalist. In reality, he was splitting his life in two. In the 1980s, he began taking Patricia's son with him on assignments and even to political conventions. He bought Patricia a $50,000 cottage in Ireland. He called her every night, visited every 2 or 3 weeks, and treated her family as his own. For decades, he balanced this hidden world with his public one. In June 1997, Kuralt lay in a New York hospital, dying of lupus. 16 days before his death, he wrote Patricia a letter. "I'll have the lawyer visit the hospital to be sure you inherit the rest of the place in Montana if it comes to that." It was his last attempt to protect the life he had built with her. He had already secretly arranged for her to buy part of the land earlier that year, but now he wanted her to have it all. On July 4, 1997, Charles Kuralt died. At his funeral, Patricia Shannon appeared with the letter in her hand. For his wife Petey, it was a devastating revelation. She had been married to him for 35 years and never knew he had a second family. She discovered the truth not in private, but at his funeral. The Montana property, worth more than $600,000, became the center of a bitter legal battle. Kuralt's daughters from his first marriage joined after Petey's death in 1999. Patricia testified in court, describing how Charles raised her children as his own. She even read a Christmas poem he once gave her, ending with the words, "My life." That poem, along with the letter, proved their bond. In 2000, the Montana Supreme Court ruled in Patricia's favor. The estate lost nearly $1 million after taxes and legal fees. Kuralt's daughters inherited nothing from the land, and the public image of their father was shattered. The final blow came in 2002, when Patricia Shannon published her memoir, Charles and Me. She revealed everything: the poems, the calls, the secret trips, the cottage in Ireland, the decades of money. The man America trusted as a truth teller had lived the greatest lie of all.